Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our podcast. My name is Chris.
And my name is James.
And we're the Formula One Bros.
Just two twins with the love of F1 to talk about everything in the world of Formula One.
And this week, we will be rounding up all of the stories that are important into setting the stage for the 2022 F1 season, everything that's going on in the off season, and everything that you need to know behind the scenes. So first couple things before we get started, I have to say, if you see cats in the middle of this episode, I apologize. If I shut my door and I shut my door to my office and I leave them out, they will try and bust in like they're invading another country or something. They will try so hard. So it is best for everybody if I just leave the door open and let them come and go as they please. And one quick thing before we get started, it's adjacently related to F1, but it's just kind of a heartwarming story in the world of motorsport. After 1,258 days of not driving a car after a spinal cord injury at the Pocono Raceway in the IndyCar Series, Robert Wickens finally got behind the wheel in the Michelin Pilot Series of a Hyundai Sonata. With Brian Herta Autosport, and a car specifically designed to drive completely with your hands. So they have a pull system with brake that actually for the brakes that actually activates the brake pedal, and then they have a fly-by-wire throttle system that they can turn on and off between Robert and the other drivers on the team. And also the paddle shifters and everything. So he can drive. He's paralyzed below the waist from his spinal cord injury in the IndyCar Series. And after 1,258 days of not being in a car, he finished on the podium.
Oh,
and this is all.
That's good.
Yes. So this is all for the weekend of the Rolex 24 at Daytona with the IMSA series, which we're recording on Saturday, January, what is it, the 29th?
29th.
29th. Yes. So the race kicks off later today. So that was a part of the weekend, and Robert Wickens finished on the podium.
Good for Robert. That's good, because that crash at Pocono, I remember watching that, and it was absolutely horrific.
It was, not great.
So knowing that he finished on the podium, was that his first race back? He was finished on the podium?
Yep, that was his first race in a car, first motorsport race in a car after his crash in Pocono in the IndyCar Series. And that was like 2018 when that happened.
That was a long time ago.
Yeah, it was a long time ago. He was driving for then Schmidt-Peterson Motorsport, which is now Arrow McLaren SP. Yeah, and he was one of those drivers. He came over from DTM because, being from Canada, he was really good friends with James Hinchcliffe, and James Hinchcliffe gave him a test when James Hinchcliffe was driving for Schmidt-Peterson, and just immediately took like a duck to water and was immediately a favorite for the championship. I think at the time of his crash, he was like P2 in the championship as a rookie coming over from DTM. So this is huge, and it's huge for not just motorsport, but also the spinal cord injury community. And he's been on a long road to recovery, and I suspect that it will kind of never be the same for him. So it's good that he's getting back behind the wheel, but also good for Brian Herta Autosport and for Hyundai for kind of piloting or like trying this technology for drivers that have been paralyzed to get behind the wheel. So
and that's huge for the entire world of motorsport, honestly. Having that technology, and kind of relating it to F1, there's been a big push in F1 for diversity, not just gender diversity, racial diversity, but I think this bodes well for people with all varying levels of disabilities and all that kind of stuff. So that's awesome. Thanks for sharing, Chris. I appreciate it.
Of course.
Nice.
And that was pioneered because the owner of Arrow McLaren SP, Sam Schmidt, is a paraplegic. And so he is paralyzed from the neck down. So or I guess that would be a quadriplegic. So he's paralyzed from the neck down. And so that it kind of paved the way for that kind of thing. Yeah. So getting right into it, now into some F1 stuff, lots of juicy details to get into, and a lot of breaking news that has come as recently as yesterday. So let's go ahead and get right into it. First thing that we need to cover, there have been a lot of moving parts between team principals of teams. So a lot of teams going through a lot of restructuring. So just, I'm gonna go real quick and just kind of go through all of them. So the first one that we have is Atmar Safnauer left as team principal at Aston Martin and replaced by Mike Crack, who's a former BMW Motorsport team boss there. And he, so he's out at Aston Martin. And then Marcin Budkowski has left Alpine, parted ways with Alpine. And it is suspected, though it's not announced yet, that Atmar Safnauer will replace Budkowski at Alpine. And then Alain Prost is out at Alpine as an advisory role. So Alain Prost, and I'll talk about Alain Prost in a little while, but he was an advisor to the Alpine team, and he has also left. So initial thoughts and reactions, James.
I was honestly very surprised to see Atmar leaving Aston Martin, because he's been in that team for quite a long time.
Yep.
And he was a big part when it was before it was Racing Point, it was called Force India. He was a big part. Him and Sergio Perez were both a really big part in kind of saving that team after Vijay Mallya was removed from the team. And that team went into administration. And it was him and Checo that kind of saved that team. So my initial reaction was to be very sad, but also I'm skeptical. Well, not skeptical, but I'm wondering how much influence did Lawrence Stroll, the owner of the team, have in that move? Because Lawrence Stroll, I have no idea how he's able to do what he does, but he has so much influence on so many things in Formula One. Like, Lawrence was the reason Aston Martin bought in, and they were rebranded as Aston Martin instead of keeping it Racing Point. And I wonder if there was a difference in the vision that they have for the team. I don't know exactly, because there hasn't really been a lot on behind the reasoning of Atmar leaving.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering if it was a Lawrence Stroll influence that kind of forced him to leave.
Yeah. Well, in this case, I think that's a very accurate statement. I think initially my initial reaction too was I was very surprised, but kind of going and looking back at everything that has happened over the past year or so with Team Silverstone, was Force India, then Racing Point, now Aston Martin. Lawrence Stroll is like the key to all of it. So he's the biggest investor in that team. He's one of the biggest investors in the Aston Martin company and in their road cars. He's like the whole team, the team as a whole is completely reinvesting in their future. So they're building an entire new facility, an entire new wind tunnel, like redoing everything. They're on a massive recruitment drive to get people over to that team. And so the key to all of it is Lawrence Stroll. And he is kind of playing puppet master here and putting all of the pieces together. And I think it just got to a point where Atmar Safnauer just kind of didn't fit into that vision. Not to say that Atmar Safnauer was a bad team principal. He was clearly, I mean, he was loved by everybody in that team.
Oh,
he
yeah.
Was an excellent advocate for that team. He's the reason why it had that underdog culture of doing as much as you can with as little as possible. And that team really punched above its weight class. I mean, it's a Grand Prix winner. That team is a Grand Prix winning team now. So he was a huge part of that. But now I suspect that he's just not really, fitting into that vision. And I think, I mean, you look at everything that happened in 2020 with the pink Mercedes saga, and then everything that happened in 2021 with the 4 key aerodynamic rule changes that definitely hurt the lower rake concept cars. And Atmar Safnauer was the spokesperson, speaking out against all of that. He was the one that was in front of the camera saying that, the pink Mercedes thing is ludicrous. He was the one that's saying that Aston Martin and Mercedes were directly targeted for these things. But if you go back and watch those interviews and watch him give those statements, I'm not entirely convinced that he actually believed what he was saying. And I think
that is very true.
I think that was coming from all of that stuff was coming from the very, very tippy top up to Lawrence Stroll and the key investors in that team, because they're they're just revamping the team. Yeah. And so I think that is what it was. And now it is. So before we get into Alpine and him potentially going to replace Bukowski at Alpine, we have to talk about Mike Crack, because Mike Crack is a huge, he has a wealth of experience running the BMW Motorsport program from World Rally Championship to World Endurance Championship. He has so much experience, and to me, it almost kind of mimic, this is the third team now that has appointed a team principal from not within the Formula One fold. So the first to do it was Andreas Seidel, came into McLaren, and he was formerly heading up the Porsche's LMP1 program for Le Mans. And then
and look how successful McLaren has been since appointing Andreas Seidel.
Yeah, I mean, they appointed Andreas Seidel for the 2019 season. Yep. And we all know how the 2019 season ended. It ended with Carlos Sainz on the podium in Brazil. 2020 was huge because they started the season with Lando Norris on the podium. And now they've had so much success in 2021, that team is now a Grand Prix winning team again. So that's huge.
And they were the only team to get a 1-2 last year, which is insane.
Yes. And then also the next year, in 2021, brand new for 2021, Jost Capito was appointed by Dorilton Capital to be team principal at Williams. And Jost Capito was the former team principal for the VW Rally team. And that has been the Volkswagen Rally team has been the Mercedes of rally for the past 10 years.
Very successful.
It is a super successful rally team, huge success. And so that was a big appointment for Williams. And now this is the third team principal appointed that is outside of the Formula One fold. And I think that's a very specific conversation in and of itself. Are we starting to, have this thing where, Formula One is, starting to look outside of itself for stuff like this, which I think is a very good thing. But
I think so too.
Yeah, it's huge.
I think so too.
So now Atmar Safnauer goes to Alpine, and he's replacing Martin Bukowski, who was a very popular member of the team, very good, but he was in that team was in a dual team. Bukowski was not sole team principal. He was the motorsport director. So he was the person at the racetrack, but there are other people calling the shots. And now it is rumored that Atmar Safnauer is replacing him. Yeah. And they're making it one unified team principal position. So
that'll be good. That'll be good.
Yes. And not to say that their setup didn't work well for them in 2021, because Esteban Ocon was a race winner. Fernando Alonso finished on the podium twice.
And I mean, Esteban almost got a second podium, but got he got passed right at the very last minute by Valtteri. But
the team's form at the end of the season was awesome. And
yes,
so they clearly,
I
think they just didn't really quite understand the car at the beginning of the season. But by the end of the season, they really knew how to get the best out of that car. Like, I think Qatar and Saudi Arabia were, I think, the two best performances for that team. Yep. So I think it's another team that is just really, really ambitious, is in the middle of a lot of upheaval. And especially this team, this is Atmar Safnauer. If he replaces Budkowski, which he's rumored to do, this will be the fourth team principal in 6 years since Renault bought Team Enstone from Lotus.
Yeah.
So it's huge. And this is also not a Budkowski decision too. This is coming from Alpine Cars CEO, Laurent Rossi.
Yeah.
And he's been with the team, like Budkowski was with the team for several years in technical leadership. Then he worked for Formula One in the technical department and was kind of instrumental in recreating the 2014 and 2017 technical rules. And he came into Alpine, and I think they've been a huge success since Budkowski came in. So it's really interesting to see that he's leaving. But again, I think it's going to be really good for them to have one team principal and someone as popular as Atmar Safnauer.
And as successful as him too. Yes. Because, I mean, you said it before, but they were the team, and it wasn't just week in and week out. It was season in and season out. They would, season to season, they were consistently the most efficient Formula One operation.
Yes.
They were so successful with so little.
Yep.
And,
for sure.
And that bodes really well, because, look at other teams who don't have a whole lot like that team, like, for example, Haas, or well, I wouldn't really say Alfa Romeo, but other teams that don't have as much as the big teams aren't as successful. But you look at how successful Force India and then Racing Point and now Aston Martin have been. Otmar knows what he's doing, and I think that'll be really, really good for Alpine.
Yeah, and I think that is kind of, again, talking about culture in the team. Lots of teams are investing in culture. I think this whole 2020 rules reset is a huge opportunity for these teams that have been historically, for the entire V6 turbo hybrid era from 2014 to now, have been underperforming and underachieving. I think this is a huge opportunity for them to completely reshake the running order. And you're seeing, another team that is reinvesting in their culture. And I think Atmar Safnauer could be very good for that culture, because that team has done so little with so much. I mean, you think about, like, Alpine is a subsidiary of Renault. Renault is a partly state-owned company. So that team has backing from the country of France.
Mm-hmm.
So they have so much resources, and they've done so little with it in the past 6-7 years.
Yeah.
Especially considering how Team Enstone has been in the past, and the success that Renault had previously in the 80s, and then the success that Lotus had when Kimi Raikkonen was driving for them.
Oh my gosh, 2012, 2013, that team was in the fight for a championship both those years.
Yeah. So that team has had success, and now I think they're really reinvesting in getting back to that. And on the Alpine train, I mean, we have to talk about Alain Prost, because if you don't know who Alain Prost is, he's a multiple F1 world champion from the 80s. He's known as the Professor because of his very, very calculated driving style. He's very calculated. And he was, at the time, and still is, regarded as one of the greatest of all time. I mean, and when you think about Formula One in the 80s, you think about two people, you think about several people: Ayrton Senna, Nigel Mansell, Nelson Piquet.
Yep.
Alain Prost. Like, you think about those people. Alain Prost, and so he initially raced for Renault. That's how he got his start before he went to McLaren, and then Ferrari, and then Williams. And there have been several drivers in kind of the same role as Prost, like Jenson Button, former F1 world champion, is an advisor at Williams and is a driving coach.
Yeah.
Niki Lauda, before he passed away in 2019, was a advisor to Mercedes. Jean Todt will be returning to Ferrari as an advisor. So it's literally just kind of someone from outside of the team who is kind of contracted by the team just to kind of oversee operations, give input, just kind of be there to help in any way possible to drive the team forward. And that takes, and it's very different team to team. Like Jenson Button works more with the drivers to help with them. Jean Todt doesn't really need to do that. So he's probably going to be more the political side of Ferrari.
Yeah.
And having been a former team principal of the Scuderia, he's, something like that. And so, and Niki Lauda too was kind of an advisor. Just he really worked closely with Toto Wolff, and team principal matters to kind of drive the team forward. And Alain Prost was very much the same way. So, and from what I understand, it was not an amicable thing. Like Alain Prost was, well, first it was like they came to a decision. Alain Prost decided to leave at the end of 2021, but they were going to announce it together, and Alpine just kind of like outed him.
Yeah, and they just kind of did it.
He left, and he's kind of disgruntled about it. So it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see, because we never really know with advisors. We never really know what their specific roles are and kind of what they have their hands in. So it'll be interesting to see over the next year or two, how that team progresses without Prost.
Yeah, and I was really upset to read, because he came out with a statement. Alain Prost came out with a statement basically calling the team out, being like, "Yo, what the heck?" Like he was saying he was not treated respectfully all the time, and it's like, how can you as a team have someone with so much experience
and as many world championships as him,
and as many world championships as he does, and not treat him with the utmost respect?
Yeah.
And
it's weird.
Like, that's a very, very fishy to me. And I was really, really disheartened to read that.
Yeah. And he's so
successful.
And he's such a popular character in the paddock.
Yeah.
Like
everyone loves him.
He's Alain Prost, like, So it's just weird. So that's pretty much everything you need to know. So one last thing, with Atmar Safnauer rumored to be going to Alpine, again, has not been officially announced. And I suspect it'll be announced closer to when, like mid-February, when the cars are launching when the teams are launching their new cars. That former title sponsor to Aston Martin, or team Silverstone, Racing Point, Aston Martin, BWT, is suspected to go with him to Alpine. So it'll be interesting to see how much, because BWT's thing is like there has to be pink on the car, right? And when BWT was title sponsor of Force India and Racing Point, the cars were pink. They were called the Pink Panthers. So it'll be interesting to see. Obviously, Alpine is a huge brand, especially in the French brand. So like last year they drove with literally the French flag on their car. So it'll be interesting to see how much pink. I think the thing that I'm looking forward to most is seeing how much pink is on the car, because it's going to be there. Like it is gonna happen.
Well, it was suspected and announced that BWT was suspected to have joined Alpine. And then it broke that Atmar Safnauer is leaving Aston Martin. And so that's where all the rumors are swirling around, with Atmar going to be at Alpine, because BWT, who was the sponsor of that team for so long, is now going to be at Alpine.
Yep.
So they basically have said it without saying it, pretty much.
Yeah.
Like, it's going to be one of those things. It was like when Atmar Safnauer is announced at Alpine, everyone's going to be like, we've known this. We've known. It's not going to be, I don't think it's that going to be big of a surprise, but
yeah, it's a matter of when, not if.
Yeah, it really is. It's like looking at our watch, like, okay, when are they going to make that announcement? I'm sure it'll be somewhere around the time that they announce their, their car launch for 2022. It'll be around then.
Yeah, for sure.
Or maybe a part of it. Who knows?
Yep. All right. So we have to move on now. But the next thing that we have to talk about is our reactions from the silly season.
Silly season.
Just real quick, when we reference silly season, essentially that's there. It's not a specific like time frame. It's just
it's not
the period of time in which driver contracts are re-signed, and we talk about silly season in reference to drivers changing teams.
Yeah.
So the first thing that we have to talk about is we have to pay homage to the retiring Kimi Raikkonen, because that is a huge figure in Formula One that is retiring. And it's unfortunate that he's retiring with the later career that he's had, given his previous success. He wasn't really into it anymore. And it's suspected that he was not getting the most out of that car, and he was just kind of driving because it was a hobby for him. But we have to talk about the legacy that he's going to leave in Formula One, because it's
because it's huge. Literally,
he got his start with the team that he actually is retiring from, now Alfa Romeo, then Sauber. So he got his start with Sauber, then McLaren scooped him up, and then he went to Ferrari to replace Michael Schumacher, and immediately won a world championship.
Yep.
Raced with Ferrari, then took a sabbatical, raced with Lotus, Team Enstone, which was then Lotus, and then went back to Ferrari, and then went back finally to Alfa Romeo, and to replace the outgoing Charles Leclerc, who was going to Ferrari.
Yeah. And I just want to point out, during his 2-year sabbatical, when he was not racing in Formula One, he came over to the States and was racing in NASCAR.
He did. He briefly raced in NASCAR. He did some rallying.
Yeah, I did some rallying. It was really funny. I think my favorite memory.
I think he did a couple races in the Truck Series.
He did a couple races in the Truck Series. He also did a race in the Cup Series too, at Charlotte. And so I remember watching clips of that. And so if for those of you who don't know, in 2018, when he was racing at Ferrari, there was a big thing at the Hungarian Formula One race. They forgot to connect the drink tube, so he couldn't drink any water throughout the race. And there were clips from that of him on the radio during that NASCAR race complaining about the water. It was either like they ran out, didn't fill it up, or something. It was just like, this man has the worst luck with drinking water during the race.
And speaking of Kimi Raikkonen, it came out in the past couple of days that he's now going to be the team principal of the Kawasaki motocross team in the US.
Yeah, which is pretty on brand for him.
Yeah, that's on brand Kimi Raikkonen, because he has no experience in motocross, but he's like the perfect person for it.
Oh yeah,
he just has that personality. He has a knack for anything with wheels. And he is an absolute legend that will 100%. And he's such a awesome personality that will be missed from the sport.
Gosh. Yeah. I'm so sad to see him leave. I kind of suspected at the beginning of the 2021 season that this was going to be Kimi's last year, because he was out of a contract. I think he was. Yeah, he was out of a contract at the end of this year. And I was kind of thinking, I don't think he's going to return. And at the end of the very last episode of the 2020, the third season of Drive to Survive, he was like, everyone was talking about like their passion in Formula One, and it just cuts to a clip of him and goes, well, it's more like a hobby to me. I don't have to do it if I don't want to. And I kind of got the feeling, okay, 2021 will probably be his last season.
Yeah, the writing was definitely on the wall.
Yeah, I was not surprised, but still very, very sad.
Yeah, and you could tell, I remember watching him in the early 2000s for McLaren and Ferrari, and he was just dazzlingly quick. Like he had something special, and I think he just didn't have that in the latter part of his career, whether it was at Ferrari, his second stint with Ferrari, or if it was at Alfa Romeo, just kind of didn't have it. So sad to see him go.
I think that kind of may have started towards the end of his tenure at Ferrari, in the 2018 season, because it was so obvious in 2017, 2018 that obviously they were prioritizing Sebastian, just like in Mercedes, they prioritize Lewis over Valtteri, and will probably be doing the same thing to George. But Kimi, with all the expertise and experience that he has, I'm sure to him, he was like, what the heck? Why am I all of a sudden playing second fiddle?
Yeah.
I mean, sure. Sebastian Vettel, 4-time world champion, youngest world champion ever. Yeah. Brings a lot of headlines, but like he had way more experience in Formula One than Sebastian did. So I'm sure he was probably like, what's going on?
Yeah. So next up, the next biggest thing, George Russell going to Mercedes from Williams.
Yeah.
And this was kind of like the worst kept secret in Formula One this year.
Oh, it was so poorly kept.
I mean, we were all kind of like, I mean, and it's no secret Valtteri Bottas had a down year. I don't want to absolutely berate him because he's a properly quick driver, but
he's
just
so good.
This year, just inconsistent, more downs, more valleys than peaks. Just had a down year, and it was kind of like, is George, this is kind of, and everybody was talking like 2022, like this is George Russell's year. And if it's not, like, he's got to look outside of Mercedes. Like he's got to stop letting them string him along.
Yeah. And so, even at the beginning of the 2020 season, everyone kind of had a target, because both Valtteri and George would be out of a contract at the end of 2021.
Yeah.
And going into the new regulations, I knew this was coming for this year. Since 2020, when George Russell signed 1-year contract extension and Valtteri only had 1 year left, I was kind of like, they're probably targeting the brand new introduction to the regulations, make the shuffle, make it happen.
But I think they were also waiting to see some really legitimate signs that not only George was the driver that they needed, but Williams was actually properly performing, well. They wanted to see how he would do with Williams being more competitive. And it was huge. And by the time, I don't know when he actually signed the contract. I just remember we got where was it? Was it like Belgium, when he had signed a contract and everybody was congratulating him, but it hadn't been officially announced. And it was literally the worst kept secret in Formula One.
It was so poorly kept.
I'm so excited for him because he deserves it. He's blindingly quick, and I think he's going to make an immediate impact on that team. And I think he's going to immediately take it to a Lewis Hamilton.
It is no secret, and if you know me, it is no secret, I hate Mercedes. I will say it. I don't like Mercedes. I've been a Ferrari fan and a Red Bull fan for pretty much my entire tenure as a Formula One fan. I do not like Mercedes, but I'm so excited to see George in that seat. What? I may have to buy a George Russell hat or something because I love George way more than I dislike Mercedes.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's a no-brainer for that team.
George. How can you not love George Russell? He's literally a cinnamon roll of a person. He's a fantastic driver. He has so much passion, and he's the perfect role for that.
I know the thing that they were trying to avoid was a Nico Rosberg Lewis Hamilton partnership that they had in the early turbo hybrid years, starting in 2013 and then through the early turbo hybrid years. It was a rather toxic relationship. They crashed into each other a lot. The team was often hurt by them not playing favorites and not having a clear number one driver, number two driver. The only reason why they won all the championships that they did is because they were just outclassing literally the entire field. Like they could show up on any given weekend and know that they were going to win something. And it was very rare when that didn't happen. Like, I can count on maybe two hands the number of times where it went wrong for them. So
maybe even one. Shoot.
Yeah, like so.
Spain 2016,
Belgium 2014, Sakir 2020,
Germany 2019,
Imola 2021, Monza 2021, Monza 2020. Like seven races in the, like, that's like just off the top of my head, only 7 races in the past 6 years that they've had off days, And so I think that, I think they were trying to avoid something like that, but it was becoming increasingly obvious that Valtteri Bottas was not the person that they needed. And especially this year when the championship was so important, oftentimes Lewis, and granted Max too, but oftentimes there were no number 2 drivers anywhere involved in the race, at least at the front. So I think this is a huge signing for George. And I think this 100% gives the edge for Mercedes over Red Bull, just the driver pairing alone. And we'll get into the driver pairings later, but if they can keep out of each other and they can, drive, not take points off each other, not crash into each other, I think, Mercedes is gonna, that's a good thing. And so then we have to talk about, because George Russell is going to Mercedes, he's replacing Valtteri Bottas, and Valtteri Bottas is going to Alfa Romeo. So what are your thoughts on that?
I think he'll do a lot of good there, because Alfa Romeo is not 100% a back marker.
Yeah,
they kind of are. They're at like the bottom end of the midfield, but I think it's very clear that Valtteri still has a lot of love and passion left in the sport.
And so still, I think, properly fast,
and still a very, very talented driver, a good fast driver. I was hoping he would sign for a team kind of further up in the grid historically, like Alpine or somewhere around there. But I think it's a good fit for him.
Yeah. So
I'm just glad he's still in the sport. Ultimately,
I agree.
I'm so glad he's in the sport. Oh my gosh.
I agree. He's very popular in the sport. He's properly fast. And I think this will also give Alfa Romeo, because with Kimi Raikkonen and with Antonio Giovinazzi, I'm not entirely convinced. And I don't think many people were entirely convinced that car was driven to its absolute limit. And with Valtteri Bottas, especially in qualifying, that he is going to get the best out of that car. Like you just know. And so I think that'll be a really good opportunity for that team. Last couple things, let's just do like a couple quick reactions. We have Alex Albon to Williams to replace George Russell, and Guan Yu Zhou to replace Giovinazzi. Just quick fire reactions on those.
Yeah, I think it's good to see Albon back in the sport. Because I like his personality. I'm a little bit skeptical of how well he'll do because of how poor his 2020 season was with Red Bull. There were a lot of expectations, especially with how well the second half of 2019 was. With how well he raced at the end of 2019 at Red Bull after replacing Pierre. But he just had such a poor 2020. And so I'm a little bit skeptical. I kind of wish, because Oscar Piastri, F2 champion, is extremely talented. And I was kind of hoping someone like him would get a chance to come up into Formula One. But I'm glad to see Albon's back. I am a little bit skeptical though.
I think it'll be good for him. He's still contracted with Red Bull, but he's not in a Red Bull team. And I think having that pressure eased off of him a little bit will be really good for him. And I'm excited. And the Williams is supposed to be more competitive. So they're progressing really well. So I think it'll be really good for him.
Yeah.
But I think it's going to be an important year for him.
Yes, it is going to be a very important year for him.
Yeah, so let's talk about Joe replacing Giovinazzi. First of all, sad to see Giovinazzi go. He was a very popular character in the paddock, but he's off to Formula E, racing for Dragon.
Yeah. It's cool. It's cool to see Guan Yu Zhou. He's the first Chinese driver to be in Formula One, and I think that's full time. Yes, full time. I think that's really great. I do see it more so of a little bit of a pay driver situation because, again, I love Oscar Piastri, and I think I think it should have either been him or, some of the Ferrari development drivers like Robert Schwartzman, who's been at Ferrari now for, this will be his, I think, second year as a development driver for Ferrari. Callum Ilott as well, also in the Ferrari Driver Academy. Granted, I don't think that's no longer a Ferrari Driver Academy seat.
Nope.
But yeah, so it's no longer a Ferrari Driver Academy seat. So they can really do whatever they want with that seat. But there are a lot of really talented drivers who have kind of been waiting.
Yeah.
And then they just scooped up Zhou. I think it's great for Guan Yu Zhou, but
I think it's also good for the team because they're getting a lot of financial backing and a lot of interest. I think, Formula One is also trying to have a second race in China. I think that'll be really good, especially with the traditional Shanghai Chinese Grand Prix coming back and expected to be 2023, 2024, thereabouts. They want a second race in China. They want to expand to the Chinese market. I think having a full-time driver with a lot of backing as Zhou does, I think is going to be good for the team. And I think Frederick Vasseur, the team principal of Alfa Romeo, has even said, we got more interest from sponsors in 24 hours than we did in the entire Alfa Romeo era starting in 2019. So
that's good. That's good.
So so we don't have a whole lot of time left in this episode. So let's just kind of go through it. Teams this year this is a make or break year for them. The teams that we have listed are Aston Martin, Haas, Alpine, and Ferrari. So let's just go through all of those. Quick reactions. Let's start off with Aston Martin.
Aston Martin, it definitely is a make or break season. With Atmar leaving, he's a very influential part of the team. So it'll be interesting to see where he goes with that. They took a huge step back last year. It was crazy because the beginning of the season, they did well. They had, Sebastian Vettel had, really, really strong appearance in Monaco. And then in Baku, got a podium, second place. And it's looking like that team and Lance Stroll was doing really well in that race too until his tire blew. But the second half of the season, it was just, it was painful to watch. So I'm really, really hoping that they can kind of dig themselves out of that hole next year. And it really will be make or break for that team.
I also think that team in 2021, it was just their peaks were really, really high. One podium for Sebastian, should have been two podiums for Sebastian Vettel had he not been disqualified in Hungary.
Yeah, he got disqualified.
Lance Stroll had some really strong performances and was a really big contributor of points for that team.
Mm-hmm.
But their peaks were too few and too far between to really make an impact in the Constructors' Championship. So I think, with the success that they had in 2020, with all of the recruitment drive that they're getting, that they're going under, all of the investment, for Lawrence Stroll, they're building a new facility. This year is kind of going to be, is all the hype real? Is all of that real for them? Are they going to be set up for success in the future? Is the initial investment from Lawrence Stroll paying off?
Yeah. And speaking of, and I'll talk about Ferrari in a sec when we get to Ferrari, but unlike Ferrari, this year will be very, very important because Ferrari had a couple down years and they're working on building that back up. But with this team, with being a lot newer to the sport than Ferrari and has less of a legacy in the sport than Ferrari, having a down year is not something that you need.
Yeah. Well, and also
Ferrari in each decade, Ferrari has had some sort of down year, except for the 2000s before the 2010. But
Well, I also think too that that team, so they had the whole pink Mercedes thing. So they took the 2019 championship winning W10 and they essentially took pictures, had a 3D render of it made, and copied their car for 2020. So they literally had a 2019 Mercedes as their chassis and aerodynamically, for 2021. They were hugely successful. It was a Grand Prix winning team. They had a ton of podiums. They did well in the Constructors' Championship. And then they had such a horrible year in 2021. How much have they learned from that experience? That's going to be put to the test in 2022.
Yeah.
How much have they learned from having a Mercedes as their car? And then, they took that Mercedes and then they did their own development with that car. Like they didn't copy Mercedes developments. They didn't get any of the developments from Mercedes. They did their own developments. So how much have they learned from that?
Hopefully a lot. A lot.
All right. So let's move on. Yeah. Haas, the biggest one.
This is the biggest make or break. Haas. Yeah. They are the youngest team. They've been in the sport since 2016. This will 16, yeah. 16. So this they had just horrible last year. They were finishing dead last every single race. Contrast that with their NASCAR team, who is a very successful NASCAR team. The reason I think this is so make or break is because, and it's been made very clear in the Drive to Survive series, Gene Haas is very close to pulling out.
Yeah.
And I think if they cannot get their ducks in a row and get out of the back of the field, kind of back to where they were in 2018, I think within the next 2 years, Gene Haas pulls out.
Yeah. Well, the other thing that's going to be important for them, like from a technical standpoint, is they didn't develop their 2021 car at all. They put none of their, they spent all of their money in developing their and getting ready for 2022. So Mick Schumacher has already said that the car drives much better, that they've made some progress. How much
and
of
that's actually encouraging, because a lot of the drivers who've already tested the 2022 car say it's harder to drive.
Yeah.
So the fact that a harder car to drive is already better than their previous car.
Pretty good. So I think that they're making progress, but it's going to be how much progress have they made in comparison to everybody else?
Yeah.
And people like James Allison at Mercedes have already said, like, there are going to be teams that get this catastrophically wrong, like the new regulations. Is that going to be Haas?
It's not Haas. I hope not.
Because if it is, we might not see Haas on the grid much longer.
Yeah. And that looks bad for American teams in the future.
Yeah. At least as an American team in Formula One under the name of Haas. We'll see.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on. We've covered Alpine a lot.
Yeah.
But I want to focus more on their technical progress and their driver lineup, because they are making a lot of progress technically. They made a huge progress technically over the course of 2021, and their driver lineup is stunning. Everybody thought that Fernando Alonso coming back was going to absolutely throttle Esteban Ocon, but they were much more evenly matched throughout the season, which is a huge boost for Esteban Ocon's reputation. Yeah. And they work so well as a team. They work incredibly well together.
And the next episode we do is going to be talking about driver pairings. And ranking our personal rankings for driver pairings. It was so good to see, because it seemed like the entire season Fernando was helping, coaching, and encouraging Esteban. Because in the past, Fernando, it was a one-man show. It was every team he joined, it was Team Fernando. And he was the only person in his eyes, it seemed like, that mattered. But now they work so well together, and they had a lot of success last year. And I think Alpine is kind of a make or break this year, because I think if they get it catastrophically wrong, I don't know, will Fernando stay?
Yeah. And the other thing is, and we'll talk more about their driver pairings later, so I don't want to spend too much time on that. But the last thing that I want to say at Alpine is there's so much ambition around the team and everything that they're doing in the restructure of the team and everything that's going on. There's so much ambition and so much hype around it. Can they live up to that expectation?
Yeah.
And then the last one is Ferrari. And then this will also kind of take us into everything that is awesome and hyped up about Ferrari for the off season. But Ferrari, they just had a lot of struggles, and it's and the struggles came from their power unit.
Yeah. And it's mainly overflow from their struggles in 2020.
Yep. Yeah. So they've been struggling with their power unit for the past couple of years. They're completely redesigning it. The reason why it's key for them is because in 2022, there's an engine freeze. And so
until 2026,
with the exception of reliability, no power unit is allowed to be updated for performance at all until the new engine regulations come in 2026. So if Ferrari gets their power unit wrong again, they're screwed for the next
4 years.
4 years. 2022, 23, 24, 25. 4 years. So the next 4 years, they're completely screwed.
Yeah, but and it's not like...
But if they get it right, if they get it really, really right, and they are a championship contending team, the next 4 years are going to be great for Ferrari fans.
Yep. So it'll be great for us.
Everything is relying on how well they do with their power unit, because obviously... They have the technical ability to create a really good chassis, really good aerodynamics. They have that ability. It's all going to come down to their power unit.
Yeah. And another thing that's really important, but I think it's not as high stakes as a team like Haas or Aston Martin. No. In my opinion, I don't think, because
Ferrari's not going anywhere.
Formula One, I'll say it. Formula One is nothing without Ferrari. Ferrari is nothing without Formula One.
Yeah, well, I mean, the whole Ferrari company
started as
the F1 team.
Yeah. Ferrari have been there from the beginning, from Formula One's inception. Ferrari has been there, and they've had down years. And they've very quickly shown that they can recover from that.
Yep.
So in that sense, I don't think it's going to be that big a deal, but they just got to get the engine right.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit more about Ferrari, because there's a whole bunch of hype surrounding their team, and kind of going off of what we just talked about. I just kind of want to talk a little bit about their power unit, because they have made significant gains in two areas with the power unit. So one is Shell has helped them develop their new E10 fuel. So all of the fuels are now going to be more sustainable. Like all of the fuels that are used from all of the teams are supposed to be these like super sustainable fuels, and they have to be set to a bunch of like regulations. And Shell, the way that they've developed that fuel, Shell is their fuel partner, and they have apparently Shell has helped them in the fuel alone regain like 20 to 30 brake horsepower for the power unit. And then the other thing that they're developing a lot is they're doing a lot of development in their combustion technology. So what the pistons look like, how the fuel is combusted into energy, and like how everything works within the combustion chambers. That is what they're looking at. And apparently that has given them, some people have said like an extra 30 brake horsepower, all the way up to an extra 70 brake horsepower. So it's a huge thing. The other reason why it's worrisome though, is so all of the teams, and Alpine will be joining the fold now this year, have split the turbo and the compressor. So the turbos at the back, the compressors at the front, instead of both being together at the same place in the power unit.
Yeah.
And that was pioneered by Mercedes. Then Honda picked it up, and then now Alpine is hopping on that train. It has been the perennial like way you do things for the turbo hybrid power unit. Ferrari's not doing that. And instead they're investing, they're putting all of their chips into like combustion technology and making their engine be more powerful and more efficient. So that'll be really interesting to see. And just around the F1 community, there just seems to be so much hype. They've restructured all of their sponsors. So no more Mission Winnow. They're bringing back Santander, and they're bringing some crypto and tech sponsors on to kind of restructure their finances and everything. So there just seems to be a lot of hype around Ferrari. This is a huge opportunity. 2022 is a huge opportunity for them.
Yeah.
A lot of people are saying that they could fight for the world championship.
And I think they could, if they can nail all these things, which they have the resources to do.
Yeah.
I think they could be fighting for a championship.
Yeah.
Which will be really cool to see.
Yeah. There's also just a lot of motivation around the team. Mattia Binotto has been doing a lot of technical restructures.
Yeah.
They were incredibly consistent in the 2021 season. 38 times a Ferrari driver finished in the points across 22 races, 38 times. So they had more double points finishes than any other team in the series in 2021. Incredibly consistent. We'll get into driver pairings later, but Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc are hugely popular. They're very quick. They're very consistent. So I just think there's a lot of hype around Ferrari. And again, a lot of people are saying that they could fight for the world championship next year. And I think that is a legitimate thing that they could do. I don't agree. I don't know that they're going to be at the front of that fight, but they're going to win races next year.
They're going to be in it.
Yep. They're going to win races.
Yeah.
At bare minimum, they're going to be a regular fight for the regular contender for the podium.
Yep. I think they have it. I think they got it.
All right. So with the last couple minutes, we have lots of other big stories going around from just the off season. Before we get into the big one of the whole FIA investigation with Abu Dhabi and Lewis Hamilton, I just want to kind of so sprint races, we talked a little bit last week. Sprint races may or may not happen this year.
Yeah. Yeah. Sprint races. And we covered that a little bit last time, but it looks like it's a money issue. The teams are not, if they do more sprint races, the teams won't have as much money in their budget to work on the cars. And so I think it's looking like the sprint races aren't going to happen, which we mentioned last week. They seem very gimmicky. I'm a little bit more indifferent because I kind of, I'm not gonna lie, I kind of bought into the hype a little bit with it. Yep. So I'm very indifferent whether or not it happens.
Yeah, for sure.
But I don't think they're going to happen. I don't think they're going to happen.
Yeah, I don't know. Remains to be seen. Then we have to talk about, so the VW group, Volkswagen is a parent company for a lot of other manufacturers, the two biggest ones being Porsche and Audi. And there have been a lot of, and the VW group has been very integral in helping F1 with all of the other manufacturers formulate the 2026 regulations, which they're looking at still going to be a V6 turbo hybrid, but they're going to do it without the MGUH, which is essentially a component that manages heat in the power unit, but also takes heat lost under braking and under different circumstances and converts it into energy. It's the most complex and difficult to manage part of the power unit, and they're getting rid of it in 2026.
Yeah.
And that is hopefully allowing VW to enter in Porsche or Audi or both as engine manufacturers. And it's now rumored that we got our first taste. It's now rumored that Red Bull is going to pick up a Porsche power unit and McLaren is going to pick up an Audi unit.
Which seeing new interest, not necessarily as a team, but just new interest from other companies like Audi and Porsche coming into Formula One is so exciting. It's so exciting.
Well, and the other thing is is that going to lead to a Audi or Porsche or VW Works team? That's another thing.
It could, which honestly, adding another team to the grid, not a bad thing. Granted, we saw it miserably fail with HRT, Virgin, and Marussia. Marussia. We saw them come in, and Lotus as well, not to get confused with Lotus Renault, but just the Lotus team. We saw those teams come in and they floundered after 3 years. All of them were gone, except Marussia was in all the way up until 2014.
Well, Marussia became Manor, and Manor pulled out after 2016.
Right.
They actually had developed a 2017 car, but pulled out. Like they launched their 2017 car, but pulled out before preseason testing.
Yeah.
So all the way up until 2016. So yeah, I think that could be really good. And because especially with the power units are as complex as they are, like that's a big thing.
Yeah.
So that's really important on the power unit side. Yamamoto, the head of the Honda power unit program for Red Bull, has now joined Red Bull Powertrains. Who purchased? So he has joined Red Bull Powertrains.
I didn't know that.
To head up. This was announced like this week. He's joining Red Bull Powertrains to be kind of their head of their engine department.
Good.
Which is awesome, because he was hugely successful in the Honda side. So Red Bull purchased the IP from Honda to run their own engines, and now he's joining on board. And so I think that is huge for that team. So that'll be really successful. Yes. And another whole reason why VW is thinking about getting in is because Red Bull is without an engine supplier. They're kind of like helping. They're kind of getting help from Honda. Like Honda is going to continuously help them develop that power unit and manage it through 2026. But it's not Honda branded. They're not getting as much funding as they did from Honda. So they're kind of without an engine manufacturer right now.
Yeah.
So that's another big thing. So very glad that he's staying on board. He's going to be hugely successful for that team.
Yeah.
Him on the power unit side, Adrian Newey on the chassis side of things. I think Red Bull
will be good.
Yep.
A couple other things I want to mention with other stories. So this isn't as big, but so Formula One has been very, very committed to sustainability, which is awesome. And they have I can't remember when they made the commitment, but they made a commitment that by 2030, the whole sport will net zero carbon emissions, which is fantastic.
This was in 2020.
Yeah. So they will net zero carbon emissions by 2030. And part of that, F1 next year. So we all love the beginning of the races, the pageantry behind the beginning of the races, the military flyovers with the smoke of the nation's colors will no longer happen. So the military flyovers will no longer happen, which unless they know F1 knows that those militaries are using sustainable fuels in their military planes.
No country's military is doing that right now. Not even the US,
which isn't happening. Yeah, which isn't happening.
And it needs to be said that this is not F1 being anti-military or any government. It's purely from a sustainability standpoint. And Formula One is being the pinnacle of motorsport, and we're in the middle of a climate crisis right now. Formula One kind of digging their heels in and fighting for this is awesome.
Yeah, it is good to see. And yes, I want to touch on, because military support is very big here in the United States, and it's a very big part of I wouldn't say culture, but it's a very big part of living in the United States, is seeing military all over the place, and us coming from having relatives in the military. It is not anti-military. It is not saying that, then not protesting militaries of other countries anyway. It is purely just for sustainability reasons, which my first reaction when I saw that was like, why? And then I read it and I was like, oh, that's like a pretty good reason
for sure
to be doing it. So also, last thing I want to mention is McLaren teased us on Instagram a couple weeks ago with their 2022 car, and had the Gulf livery on it.
If they are running a full-time Gulf livery,
Oh my gosh.
cry
because
it is a beautiful car. If you don't know what we're talking about, Google images of McLaren from the 2021 Monaco Grand Prix, or just Google McLaren Gulf livery, and it is a beautiful, beautiful car. It's such an iconic livery from the history of motorsport. It's hugely iconic. I'm so excited. I hope that it's a legit thing that happens, because it's going to be a beautiful car.
I don't know if that is, but they teased it, and I was like, oh man, because if they do that for 2022, they're just giving the people what they want. They're just giving because after that livery was announced, like, why are they only doing that once? Like, why did they only run that in just Monaco?
Yep.
Like, oh gosh. So hopefully, fingers crossed.
Yeah. All right. So last thing is we need to chat about the FIA investigation into Abu Dhabi and how that is linked with Lewis Hamilton's future. And I just kind of want to, like, what we know now. And there is also, and I'll also read it. There's an FIA. I'm going to pull it up on Twitter. The FIA released a statement on kind of how everything is. So essentially what happened, if you didn't watch the 2021 Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, the championship was tied on points. Whoever won the race won the championship. Lewis Hamilton pretty much led the entire race. There was no hope for Max Verstappen to win.
It was his to win.
Lewis was just dominating. And with 6 laps to go, Nicholas Latifi crashed and brought out the safety car. And now, before I have to say this is not Nicholas Latifi's fault. And it is ridiculous.
Oh my gosh.
It is utterly ridiculous that the level of hate that Nicholas Latifi received in the wake of his crash, causing a safety car, completely upended the race and allowed Max Verstappen a chance to fight for the win, and did. And that's how Max Verstappen became world champion. It is utterly ridiculous, the amount of hate that Nicholas Latifi got. But crashed, safety car comes out. Mm-hmm. Initially, it was Lewis, 5 lapped drivers, then Max. It was initially said that no lapped cars were going to be allowed past, because the safety car, at the discretion of the race director, the lap drivers can pass the safety car to get out of the way and give themselves the lap back, and they get a chance to come back around to the back of the field. So that happened. Initially, it was no safety cars, and then only 5, those 5 drivers were allowed to overtake the safety car. That same lap, the safety car came in with 1 lap of racing to go, and that set the stage for a 1-lap shootout between Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen. Lewis Hamilton was on old hard tires, Max Verstappen brand new soft tires because he pitted at the safety car. Max Verstappen made a pass into turn 5 and won the race. So that is very controversial for a couple things. Obviously, a lot of people saw that as a setup. Like, this was rigged. This was made possible. So one thing that I want to mention is it's not in the regulations, but all the teams agreed to a kind of a gentleman's agreement that where possible, races would finish under green flag conditions. Mm-hmm. And Michael Massey, the race director, did just that. What happened, though, is what there's a debate about is the number of lap drivers that were allowed to pass and the safety car coming in the same lap that those lap drivers are in, because it is in the regulations that once lap drivers overtake the safety car, the next lap, the safety car will come in. So which would have, if that regulation was followed, it would have meant that the race would have finished under caution. Yeah. And Lewis Hamilton would have won the championship. The thing that is controversial is that, but there's a regulation in there that the race director, Michael Massey, has overreaching discretion on all safety car matters. So it essentially doesn't matter what the regulations say. Mm-hmm. Michael Massey can decide essentially whatever he wants.
Which is really fishy.
Which is fishy. So on top of all of that, the stewarding from the 2021 and 2020 seasons has been called under criticism. really ever since Charlie Whiting passed away and handed the race director position over to Michael Massey, stewarding has been like in the crosshairs of everything. There's so much scrutiny, and this was just kind of like the biggest, most visible thing, and it directly affected the result of a championship. Yeah. Now, I have to say before I get into it, whether or not you agree with what happened in the regulations, they had Lewis and Max had one racing lap to duel it out, and Max came out better. Max deserves the championship. Lewis had a fair shake at the championship, and had the roles been reversed, I suspect that Mercedes would be the one saying, "Oh, it was fair racing, yada yada yada.
Yep.
It was fine." Had Mercedes won, they would be saying nothing. But
yep.
Mercedes after the race, Mercedes protested the result of the race. It was thrown out by the FIA. Now the FIA has said that they're going to investigate what happened because there was a breach in the regulations.
Yep.
Stewarding, or the regulation of the rules, the managing of the rules throughout the entire season has come under question. And so the FIA are launching an investigation into this. And for almost a month, and because of this, Lewis Hamilton has been nowhere to be found. Like, he's not been heard from. And Toto Wolff has said that him driving in the 2022 season is up in the air, though he's under contract. Toto Wolff doesn't know. Nobody knows if Lewis Hamilton is going to compete. And I think it is rumored that Lewis Hamilton's involvement in the 2022 season will be a result of this investigation. So let's chat about this investigation for a little bit. I just want to read you the FIA statement that they released yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
And this kind of gives us light into when we should find out. So it says, at this stage, no decision has been taken on the outcome of the detailed analysis currently underway into the events of the last Formula One Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. As previously announced, the findings of this detailed analysis will be presented at the F1 Commission meeting in London on the 14th of February after an open discussion with all F1 drivers, and then finally will be approved at the World Motorsport Council meeting on the 18th of March in Bahrain under the authority of FIA President Mohammed Ben Sulayem. So we should know February 14th, we should know what the results of that are. And then the March 18th meeting of the World Motorsport Council.
That's just confirming it pretty much.
It's a formality. They're just putting the World Motorsport Council is putting their stamp of approval on it. So we should know the results of that investigation on the 14th. So what they're investigating is only 5 cars were allowed to unlap themselves. And there's a regulation that says, it actually says in the regulations, any lapped driver, not all, but any. So are they going to change that regulation? They're taking a look at why it took so long for Michael Massey to allow lap drivers to overtake.
It should have been immediate. It should have been immediate.
It should have been immediate, yes.
It should have been immediate, all of them, or not at all.
Yes. The other thing is, I think it was delayed because the Christian Horner and Toto Wolff both had direct lines of communication to Michael Massey and were both lobbying for a result which would benefit them. Toto Wolff didn't want the lap cars overtaken. Christian Horner and Red Bull obviously did, which I think having the lap drivers overtake the safety car and getting out of the way, especially when the championship is coming down to the final lap, that is the right decision.
Yeah.
It was the timing of that decision that is really fishy that they're investigating. And they're also, I think they need to look at the rule of whether or not the race director has overarching discretion for safety car matters. It should be a very explicit set thing. Safety car comes out, the next lap or whenever possible, safety car, like the lap drivers are allowed to overtake the safety car. It has to be a very explicit setup for what they do, and it's not right now. So those are all the things that they're investigating. They're taking a look at the stewarding as a whole. And yesterday, FIA said It's not up to us as to whether or not they are going to retain Michael Massey as race director. And it's going to be up to the World Motorsport Council.
I think they'll get rid of him.
The FIA is not lobbying in either direction. So it is a real possibility that Michael Massey will no longer be race director.
Yeah.
And I think, going back to the whole stewarding thing, this to me goes all the way back to Canada 2019 with Sebastian Vettel's penalty. It goes all the way back then. And then all of a sudden he was penalized for sliding through chicane and coming back onto the track. Whatever, it's done and deal. And then the next race in Austria, Charles Leclerc was leading. Max Verstappen was chasing. Max Verstappen goes into turn 3, punts Charles Leclerc off the track. And it was a racing incident, no investigation necessary. And then they adopted this let them race policy, which is great for Formula One. But there's so much after that. There's so much inconsistency in stewarding. This is what they're looking at. And they're looking at the structure of the stewarding. They're looking at everything.
Yeah. Now, the last thing I want to talk about this. In my personal opinion, well, let me ask you, because I'm not totally sure. If the lap drivers are not allowed to pass the safety car and they just start where they are, do the blue flags come out immediately? Like, are they immediately forced to get over and let the cars by?
They should, theoretically, but I mean, if you look at the layout of Abu Dhabi, that's such a short pit straight that them yielding to Max Verstappen is going to take a while. Like, they're not going to all just pull over to the side and let the whole field pass. Like, it's a process because they immediately go into turn 1 and then they have the winding S's through 2 and 3.
Well, Max Verstappen was only in second. I don't think they would have let the whole field through, but in my opinion, had those 5 drivers not been allowed to overtake the safety car, almost every single one of them previously had stated at some point in the season that they didn't want to get in the way of Max and Lewis's fight.
Yep.
I think on fresh, soft tires, Max still could have won.
I think so too.
I think Max still could have won.
I don't know. I think so too, but it's kind of like dealing with like what ifs at this point.
Yeah.
So I don't think, I mean, obviously we're never really truly going to know because it didn't happen. We can't, look into a crystal ball and see, but I think whether or not lap drivers should every single time overtake the safety car is something that they need to look at, because right now it's just at the discretion of the race director. But it should be, this is what we did. This is how we handle safety cars every single time. Yeah. And I still think it is a good, whether or not it's in the regulations, I still think it's a good goal to have to finish every race under caution or under green flag conditions, to not have any race finish under the safety car.
That's kind of like in NASCAR where they have the green, white checkered rule.
Well, now it's overtime. So they get 3 shots. It's like they have one overtime. If it finishes under caution, the next green flag, they do a green, white, checkered. Green flag, white flag, which is the last lap, and then checker flag. If there's a caution at any point, they go into a second overtime. And at the second overtime, if there's a caution, like at the second overtime, the next flag ends the race. Once they hit the white flag, next flag ends the race. So I don't think that they're going to, but I think the FIA, Formula One, need to start looking out to other series for different rules that have been controversial. Like the overtime rule in the Cup Series is great. It ensures that every race ends under green flag conditions. It's super entertaining, especially at big races like Talladega and Daytona, like restrictor plate racing. That is hugely entertaining. Like, it's awesome.
Yeah.
And or like a qualifying rule like in IndyCar, where if a session is ended under red flag or a caution because a driver crashed, the driver that crashes, their fastest 2 times are deleted.
Wow. I didn't know that.
And so that's the whole thing. Like when Charles Leclerc crashed in qualifying in Monaco, and it guaranteed him pole because he crashed and it ended the session. Had that happened in IndyCar, his fastest 2 laps would have been deleted and he probably would have started 10th.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Whatever they do, and here's my last thought, and this kind of goes into why I dislike Mercedes so much. When that happened, and they had a right to be upset because it was how the race ended was sketchy. They had a right to be upset, but they won their 8th time constructors, and they didn't come out and publicly celebrate the fact that they had won the constructors for a record 8 times until weeks later. And it's like, really? You still won a championship. Yeah. And also with, I don't know, you win so much, you forget how to lose. And I don't think it necessarily.
Totally
Mercedes had the right to be upset, but how they reacted did not look good on Mercedes at all.
And I think especially under the circumstances, like there should be a conversation around, do we need to change the regulations? And I think it's a very good thing that the FIA is investigating this. But again, yeah, the way that they lost, I don't know. I don't want to be too critical of them, because obviously they're in a position that neither of us have any experience being in. But yeah, what I also hope is, I hope that FIA and Formula One don't make decisions based on the entertainment factor of the sport. Yes. I hope they make decisions based on the integrity of the sport, like the actual sporting regulations. I hope they make a decision based on the integrity of the sport, and not to appease their Liberty Media owning, Netflix influenced entertainment fans.
Yep.
We'll see. I don't know. We will find out. We will find out in 2 weeks. Yep. But yeah. And so Lewis Hamilton, will he come back? I don't know. I think he will. I think he will. I think he is just using his possible retirement to kind of get what he wants, which I'm not going to say anything about. Because I think, again, we need to have a conversation about the way the sport is adjudicated. Yeah, we need to have that conversation. It's necessary. And it's
needed.
It's long overdue. And Lewis Hamilton clearly has the influence to make it happen. You know, the FIA botching this and losing their most popular, most well-known, and most influential driver off track, and everything that Lewis Hamilton stands for a social justice standpoint, losing Lewis would be huge for F1. And I think they know that.
Yep.
So they definitely do. I think Lewis has no intention of truly retiring, and I think that'll be pending the result of this investigation. But it's obviously, there have been rumor mills flying about who would replace him if that happens. You know, Sebastian Vettel has been one, Fernando Alonso has been one, Pierre Gasly has been one. Like, there are a lot of people that have been rumored to take that seat, but I don't think it's going to happen. I think Lewis will be back. I think what'll be more interesting to see is if he retires after 2022. That's what I think.
That's true. Yep.
Will be a more interesting conversation, but a conversation to have at a later date, because that's in the future.
Yep.
Any final thoughts as we head into more of the off season and as we look forward to car launches?
I'm just ready to get this season started, man. There's so much hype around it. I'm ready to see what those cars look like on the track. Yep. I'm ready to see how everything shakes out.
Yeah. And as of today,
I'm just ready.
As of today, 50 days until lights out in Bahrain. 5-0. I am so excited.
So excited. So excited. But last thing, just be sure, follow us on our socials. We're on Instagram at Formula One Bros. We're on YouTube, and Spotify as well, which is most likely where you're watching this stuff. But be sure to follow along. Any important updates we'll share. We are probably going to start a TikTok soon. Wait for another couple episodes. Maybe we'll start it once the season gets going in Bahrain. But be sure to give us a follow. Give us a listen on Spotify. Hit that 5-star. Give us a good rating. And
like and subscribe on YouTube.
Please like and subscribe on YouTube.
And we'll be back.
That's all I have.
Yep, we'll be back. Special bonus episode coming out later this week that we're excited to share with you. So as always, we'll see you later, and enjoy the rest of the off season. We'll be back soon.
Thanks for listening, everyone.